Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped, and welcome to my CarVid19 Daily vlog, uploading a new video every day at 6 PM to keep you sane during lockdown. Now, last week I took you for a walk with the pups, and you can see they are eagerly awaiting another one. And I told you a little bit about myself. Now, one of the questions I get asked an awful lot is, where does my love of cars and driving come from? Well, that's really simple. There is only one person who's responsible for that, and I've never talked about him before. It's time for you to hear all about PK, or maybe from now on, Papa Petrol Ped. Are we going walkies? Are we going walkies? Where are we going? 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 Where are we going, dude? Yeah! So you join me on a walk again. Now, my walk with the dogs went down really well, and lots of people said it was like coming on a walk with you and you learnt a little bit more about me, so I thought I'd do it again. But this time I wanted to talk about my inspiration behind my love of cars and driving, and to be quite frank, my inspiration to the way I approach my life. And that is my late father, who was also called Peter, by the way. I always used to call him PK, but I guess as we've got Mama Petrol Ped, we might on the channel call him Papa Petrol Ped. Now, I am the youngest of 6 children, so I've got 5 brothers and sisters, 2 brothers, 3 sisters. So my dad was always much older than any of my friends' parents. But that's cool, because my dad was a fighter pilot. So my dad was, during the war, signed up to be an RAF pilot. He went through his basic training on Tiger Moths. He then went to Ponca City in Oklahoma in America to do his advanced training on Harvards or Texans. There's a debate as to the difference between those, but for us on this channel they're the same thing. So considering there's a Harvard that flies out of Goodwood, in the summer when you hear that coming over, I always think of my dad. And then he went from there, flew a couple of other planes, Bolt and Pull Defiance, but ended up flying Hurricanes in India. Actually, he was in India for some 2 years before the war ended. So, and he could fly a plane before he could drive a car. So growing up as a kid, when your dad's been a Hurricane fighter pilot, that's a pretty cool thing. And indeed, I actually wanted to be a fighter pilot. But I remember when I was quite young, I said to my dad, I really want to be a fighter pilot. And he went, that's awesome. He said, I want to ask you 2 questions though. How many kids want to be a fighter pilot? And I went, yeah, most of them. And how many fighter planes does the Queen have? Not so many. He said, right, okay, so if you're going to do it, make sure you're really good and do it, because you don't want to end up being a navigator, do you? But I ended up not going into the RAF, obviously. But my dad loved driving. I think, and a couple of you asked what the kind of cars from your childhood were. So I think the first car I remember my dad having was a Hillman Hunter. It was like an estate car. I kind of don't remember that car too much because I was quite young. But the car after that I remember, because my dad went out without telling my mum and bought a Triumph Dolomite 1850. A white one. It was a brilliant car. My mum hated it, but my dad loved it because it was rear-wheel drive, and at the time that was quite a racy car to have. Unfortunately, on a family holiday to Wales, you're probably going to know what happened. Yes, it blew its cylinder head gasket, because that car, if I'm right in thinking, it had a cast iron engine with an aluminium head, and it always used to have problems with basically blowing cylinder head gaskets. So that wasn't good. So that car went to the great scrapyard in the sky. And then we went through a couple of cars that really we probably won't spend too much time talking about. And they were Talbot Solaras. Now, question, who can remember number plates from there? I remember my dad's first Talbot Solara was green, and its registration plate was MRB836W. He only had that for a year, but it didn't have power steering, so we replaced it with a blue Talbot Solara. I mean, who has one Talbot Solara and then thinks they're going to have another one? Hateful car. But that was ANU924Y. See, I remember these things. We had that, and then thankfully, around about the time I was going to start to be learning to drive, he got a Peugeot 309, a maroon one. But when I was a kid, I used to sit in the passenger seat and my dad would let me change gear and we'd go on journeys, and Dad hated motorways, so we'd always plan journeys. Even when we were driving to somewhere like Cornwall or North Wales, he'd always plan the journey to avoid as much motorway as possible, and this is the days before sat-nav, obviously. So he'd write these routes on a piece of paper and stick them to the dashboard. We used to call them strip routes. And it was basically all the major turnings that he needed to take on the journey so that he didn't need to use a map. I'm going to swap my hand because my arm's getting tired. So these are the things that kind of stick in your memory. But he loved driving. He loved driving well. He loved using the engine. He loved all the kind of techniques of driving, and I think that's really important, and that transfers into how I drive a car. So when I started to learn to drive, my dad would take me out in the 309 as well as having lessons with a local driving instructor, and we'd work on the finesse stuff. We'd spend hours just inching, basically first gear, just driving as slowly as you can to get that clutch control. He used to put a glass of water on the dashboard and we'd have to drive round and I'd make sure I'd not spill any so I could be as smooth as possible. And I think that's what instilled this deep passion and love of not just cars but driving. Now, coupled with that, my two elder brothers kind of built up my driving genes as well. So my next brother up, Robert, was in the army when I was a kid, and he was in the Royal Corps of Transport. And he was driving all kinds of cool things like the kind of six-wheel drive stalwart amphibious vehicle and tank transporters and all kinds of really cool things. And he had a Triumph Spitfire, and I just remember thinking, when I grow up, I want to have a cool car. And then my eldest brother Stephen, who I think he's been on the channel actually, but my eldest brother Stephen always had really cool company cars. And I remember he went through a series of, he was a big Cavalier fan, and he had a Cavalier SRI. Then he got an SRI 130, all of 130 horsepower, but back then that was a lot. But then the ultimate car he got, and I was so jealous, and it made me really think, I am going to do well in life so I can have a car like that. He had a Cavalier 2-litre GSI 4x4, and I just loved that car. And I remember at the time with his work, he had a hospitality box at Donington Motor Circuit, and we were there one day kind of setting it all up for the season, and he just threw me the keys and said, go and have a drive around. And I can remember just driving around Donington, all the sort of, not the circuit sadly, all of the kind of support tracks and things, and the roads that go around Donington Estate, and just thinking, this is the coolest thing ever, I've got to have a really nice car. And I think if we think back, all of us have some kind of inspiration, some kind of reason why we love the things we love, and for me that definitely comes from my dad. Now sadly we lost my dad in 2013, and that was before I even started YouTube, so he never kind of got to see what I've been doing and the kind of cars and experiences that I've had, which I always find quite sad really. But I always think back on those times in his car with really fond memories. The really gutting thing actually is the Harvard that flies out of Goodwood. You can pay to go up in that as an experience, and he would have loved that. But sadly it wasn't to be. But there you go, you know, the inspiration behind things, the reason we are who we are is very often, you know, a strong influence in our life. It's maybe our parents, our siblings, somebody you know, a family friend, whatever it might be. For me, it's my mum and my dad. My mum's been on the channel, everybody loves Mama Petrol Ped. She's an inspirational lady, and by the way, lots of you reached out. I put a thing on my social media recently about Mum. She'd had a nasty fall and ended up in hospital, which, she's 93 now, bless her. It's really not a good time to be in hospital right now. But she came out of hospital this week. She's back home. She's okay. She's still a little bit uncomfortable, but she's doing well. And I'm overwhelmed with all the lovely messages of support from all you amazing peddlers. We read them out to her, and she thinks it's quite funny that she even got the nurses on the ward to be playing Petrol Ped videos so that she could hear me. So yeah, that's Papa Petrol Ped, PK. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Again, you know, the great thing about this kind of lockdown is you end up having to think about ideas for content, and people seem to quite like knowing and finding out a little bit about me and what my motivations are. And if my motivation for why I love cars, well, that's my dad. And there you go. Oh, but then a final bit of car history. After the Peugeot 309, which I learnt to drive in, actually took over a humpback bridge a little bit fast and ripped the sump off once, but let's not go there. He then, because I was working for British Aerospace, got a Rover 214 GSI, and that was a mega car, and that was the last car that he owned. Brilliant thing that was. British Racing Green, lovely thing. But yes, there you go. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that one. If you have done so, please give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty more content to come. We'll carry on our walk, won't we, girls? What do you reckon? You're not still eating grass, are we? I can't walk backwards faster than that. Come on, dude, catch up. Yeah, come on then. You take care of yourself, guys, and remember, stay safe. Come on, Daz.